here's what's interesting. That level of acid, I've got some stats on that. That level of acid contained the same acid used in heavy industry, in aerospace, and in explosives. That level of acid is acidic enough to corrode through metal, concrete, and paint. It's the same pH range that's used to clean radioactive contamination, etch aluminum for spacecraft, and to manufacture high energy explosives. Welcome back, man. Bird Control Secrets podcast. So excited about it. So excited that you guys are watching and tuned in. We've gotten like great feedback back so far from it. And so, man, feel free to, like, as we go through, like, comment in this, like, if there's a particular thing that you want to hear from us on or would love to hear a video on, man, we want to make it for you. And we wouldn't just make it like we really want to do it in a way where it's like, you know, what kind of secrets can we reveal here? Like, what kind of things? And that's one of the things that we look for in this podcast is like, what are some things that like people are not thinking about in these types of things? And so, man, do that. It's going to be awesome. It's a ton of fun hanging out with you guys. All the training is awesome. We're just having a blast here. The team's having a lot of fun. And so today I want to get into something similar too. And we're talking about the science of why birds are hanging out, you know, at a property in the first place, right? Like a lot of times it's like, oh, we know that there's a problem. We know we're going to take care of this problem. But it's like, why are they there? Why are they causing a problem in the first place? Is it just eeny, meeny, miny, mo? I mean, like, we probably think of like some instances where it's like, hey, there are birds over here, but they're not over here. They're on this building, but the building right next door, I don't see any birds. Or like the building across the street, I don't see any birds or whatever. Like, why the heck are they causing a problem there? And if you're like a facility manager, like a plant manager or something like that, you guys are feeling my pain right now. Like, oh my gosh, like, are you kidding me? Yes, I've thought the same thing. Why the heck did these birds pick me? I don't even have any food here. Why did these birds pick me or whatever, right? And so we're going to talk about the science thing. Like, the answer is science. We're going to get a little nerdy today. This might be a little bit like a Bill Nye the Science Guy episode a little bit. I don't have any cool experiments to show you guys. Maybe like on a different episode or something, we'll break out some experiments and some beakers or whatever. And, you know, like I'll put on like some type of like scientific like thing or something like that. But that's won't be what it is, but we'll get into some stats. I probably owe like Bill Nye some money now or something like that. I'm probably going to get a bill in the mail because I use his name. I use his name at least a couple times just now, right? Like, so maybe I'll make a podcast episode about how we paid Bill Nye or something like that. But we're going to get into some science stuff. So here's some interesting stats, science-wise, about why birds choose a property. I've got some stuff in front of me here, so you see me kind of go back and forth as I talk to them. But I want to make sure I get it right and get you all the hard-hitting stuff that I can see here. Here's what's interesting. Their survival instincts are causing them to go to your location. That's what makes them choose. It's like, is this a safe place? Is this not a safe place? And how can we make sure for generations that everything is going to be safe, right? Because birds, all they're trying to do is stay alive, man. You know, it's like they're not trying to be ambitious and take over the world or do any of that kind of stuff, right? Which we know. They're just trying to stay alive. So the bottom line is that they picked a location because this location, something about it communicates that this is the best chance that our family has to stay alive, right? It's like, oh, when you look at it that way, it's like, dang, it's so simple, right? I thought it was this, I thought it was that, and all that. Like, nope. Like, basically, you've got a giant calling card out there saying, hey, pick me. Like, I want to keep you alive. Like, bring your friends, reproduce here, right? That's what's happening. Okay, so birds, they can see in the UV spectrum. We can see a certain range of light as humans, right? But we can't see into the UV spectrum. So think about like a black light being shown on something and how you can see things that kind of glows in like UV. So what's interesting is like birds, they preen, right? And when they do, they excrete these oils basically along their body. That's why like birds can look a little bit shiny. Part of it is the iridescence of the plumage, right? It's the different colors that you can see, and like there's reflection of the sun. It's what makes birds look beautiful to our eyes, like all that kind of stuff. So they preen, it releases these oils, right? And these oils have a particular marker in the UV spectrum. Now, here's what's interesting about that. What's interesting about the UV spectrum. Their droppings also have a marker in the UV spectrum. So what's interesting is when you've got a location that birds has flagged as being a safe spot, and there's droppings there, and there's the oils there that are on the feathers and all that kind of stuff, it actually acts as a marker that attracts other birds in. So they're flying. They use their little bird eyes or whatever. They're pretty keen. A lot of them are pretty keen. And some are more keen than others. So, predator birds, can see a little more keenly than others. But it's like they can see these markers from far up in the sky, and they're flying, and that's actually what can help attract and pull other birds in if you've got an existing infestation, right? Even if you power wash the droppings, this is what's interesting. UV signals and pheromones still remain, and that acts as an attractor. So if you're wondering why, man, I spend all this money, we'll talk to locations, and it's like they spend thousands of dollars a week just power washing stuff and cleaning stuff and like all this stuff, and they're like, dang it, but like it seems like the minute we power wash, all of a sudden their droppings, they're all over again. Like, it's really frustrating. It's like, yeah, and it seems like it's happening faster. It's like you've got your existing birds that are causing a problem, but the new birds are causing even more are coming in causing even more of a problem. And it just grows, and they reproduce, and they train their young, and it gets bigger over time. Okay. Here's what's also interesting scientifically. Birds have a built-in GPS that brings them back to the location every single time. A built-in GPS. So it's like they're like, hey, Google, what's up? I'd like to go back to X industrial plant, X restaurant, whatever it is. Please show me how to get back there. They've got a built-in GPS. Here's some interesting things about that. Pigeons can remember locations for years, and they will return back to the same roost daily. I mean, you remember there were carrier pigeons back in the day, right? And they would just fly for like miles and miles and miles to carry messages and go back from where they got sent, right? This is something biologically built into them. Birds can follow, and they do follow, roads. They follow highways. They can recognize landmarks and even aerial road maps to find the best nesting sites. One of the interesting things that I heard about that was in business, I love business, I kind of study it, is that that Sam Walton, he was one of the first ones to actually get a plane, go up in the air, and then pick based on what residential developments were happening and all that kind of stuff, where his store locations went, and it made sure that per location, he had the most amount of customers, right? Well, that's what the birds are doing. It's like they're using aerial maps, and they're going like, per location, what lends itself best for us to reproduce the most birds, right? It's so frustrating for you because you're like, dang it, like I've got like 20 birds here, and now it's 50, and now it's 100, and now it's 500 birds. It's like, yeah, because they actually intentionally picked your location as being the spot where they're like, we're going to make a ton of babies, and we're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and this is going to be safe, and it's great. We're creating a legacy at your location. It's like, dang it, birds, like pick somebody else, right? But that's what they're doing, right? This is interesting. Crows and seagulls can recognize human faces. So if someone feeds them like regularly, even near your property, they're going to come back into the area just expecting food. Man, one of the earliest things I can think of being on the beach is like, I was like probably 4 or something, eating a hot dog. And I go down to take a bite. My parents turn their head for like a second. And when they turn again, a seagull had freaking taken the hot dog out of the bun and eaten it, right? And I'm like, they're crying like, oh God, it's like this seagull, this huge bird just came. It wanted to eat me, but it settled for my hot dog, It's like, why did that happen? Well, man, think about, you've got people that throwing food out there. You've got trash regularly accessible for those birds, right? There are spots in California that I've gone when I go to the beaches where you can't walk on like the sand without stepping on droppings. Like there's so many droppings because there's so many seagulls out there, right? It's like, well, what are they doing? This place is safe. There's an easy food source. Let's actually keep coming back here. And they can recognize that. They can recognize human faces. In fact, it's funny. Some of you guys, we've dealt with some of the service providers who will go in strategically and harvest birds like at night, right? And that are inside buildings. And what's interesting about that is sparrows in particular will start to recognize the face of the guy. They'll start to recognize the brand on the truck. They'll recognize the hat. And so if he takes a shot at a bird and misses, that's it. He just gets one. Every time he shows up from that point forward, the bird disappears. It's like the bird's around, store's complaining, droppings around, all that stuff. They show up in the location, bird disappears. It's like, why is that? It's like, because they can recognize it. They recognize you as a threat, and now they're gone, right? Man, it's kind of crazy. Okay, so here's another something. Bird droppings, a lot of people are like, they're disgusting and they're the disease and all that kind of stuff. But here's what's interesting. They're like a chemical, biological weapon. I don't know if you knew that. It's kind of crazy, like the more that you dig into this stuff, right? But, so the bird droppings contain acid in them. You know, birds are really efficient in the way that they excrete waste. So like they don't have... This might be TMI, but you are on the Bird Control Secrets podcast right now. So it's like all the bird stuff that you could ever know. So I'll tell you this. They don't have separate orifices to get rid of feces and urine, right? Which means it all comes out of the same place in a bird. So if you're ever walking and a bird like freaking craps on your head or something or whatever, he just peed and pooped on you all in one go. It's like, man, that sucks. Thanks, bird. Like, dang it, that sucks, right? But here's what a lot of people don't know. Their droppings, because of that, contain a high amount of acid. And on the pH scale, they're about a 3 to a 4, okay? Here's what's interesting. That level of acid, I've got some stats on that. That level of acid contained the same acid used in heavy industry, in aerospace, and in explosives. It's like, dang, like their explosive junk that they just dropped on you is the same stuff that we use like in warfare. I mean, it's like a biological weapon. Like, it's kind of crazy, okay? Here's some stats on droppings. A pigeon produces around 25 pounds of droppings per year, which means that a single bird flock dumps over a ton. That's 2,000 pounds of droppings annually. 100 birds, 100 pigeons. 2,000 pounds of droppings a year. So, if you've got pigeons and it feels like you are constantly cleaning droppings, it's because you are. There's 2,000 pounds of droppings at your location a year. I mean, wow. And God bless the people that measured this. You know what I mean? Like, that's a really interesting job. I can remember one location I went to at some point, this industrial plant, and I'm in there. It was an ethanol plant, and I think it was like a couple hundred, maybe 200 or 300 birds that they had a problem with there. And we're walking around, you know, plant manager's kind of showing me where all the problem is, right? Showing me the catwalks and like all this stuff where there's droppings everywhere, feathers everywhere. You know, those of you guys who have a bird infestation know you might have maybe some predator birds around, and you're definitely going to have a bunch of dead birds around just dying of natural causes when you've got, you know, a lifespan of the pigeon naturally is like 2 or 3 years anyway. But then they get sick and all sorts of stuff happen, and they smack into glass windows and all sorts of stuff or whatever, right? So you've got this naturally occurring population of dead birds, and it's pretty gross when you've got hundreds of birds out there. But I remember pretty vividly, he took me to this one building, a pretty good-sized building. I'd say it was like 25 to 50 yards long. It had 3 hallways, and each hallway was 25 to 50 yards long. And we walk in there, and of course the smell is absolutely disgusting. Birds have access to the inside of this building, and they're loafing up on these beams and stuff for these pigeons. And we walk into it on some like stairs or a little elevated kind of catwalk thing and look down into it, and man, I kid you not, like from the front, like on the floor, from the front of the building to the back of the building, there were droppings on the floor about this high all the way back. 25, 50 yards. I mean, that's probably maybe 14 inches or so, 16 inches of droppings, front to back, all 3 of these hallways, all the way down. It was like, dude, like, you guys are going to need some heavy equipment to, like, to get these droppings out of here. Just absolutely disgusting, right? They produce a ridiculous amount of droppings. Seagulls produce 1.5 pounds of droppings per bird per month. So if you've got a 500 bird colony, you're talking about 750 pounds of bird droppings in 30 days. Now, think about seagulls at the beach or whatever, right? And remember how I was saying earlier, walking through the sand is like, I can't even walk on the sand because there's like all this bird junk. Well, that kind of explains it. If per month it's 750 pounds with 500, you guys who live in California know. I mean, like, that's kind of nothing. If you're looking around looking at seagulls, it's like, yeah, of course there's at least 500 birds here. All right, so now if that doesn't get cleaned up, because who's going through like cleaning the sand on the beach? Month 2, 1,500 pounds, right? Like, I mean, that number just, that's gross. I'm sorry if I'm grossing you guys out, but you guys are on the Bird Control Secrets podcast, so I would say that you guys might be as nerdy as we are over here. They call us the Bird Brains. Maybe not, but maybe you'll get there if you just keep watching it, okay? Okay, so here's what's interesting about that level of acid, that pH level that's in that droppings, right? We were talking about discussing and how many, but that level of acid is acidic enough to corrode through metal, concrete, and paint, right? So it is just eating through structures. Here's a couple stats. It's the same pH range that's used to clean radioactive contamination, etch aluminum for spacecraft, and to manufacture high-energy explosives. That's the level of acid. Every time a bird drops his junk at your spot, that's the level of acid that he's dropping, right? Okay, so here's some real-world uses. I just thought this was interesting. I was like, what do they use this acid for, like, usually? Okay, in aircraft etching, which I mentioned, here's what they use it for. They use it in aerospace, and they etch aluminum before they apply coatings, right, to that aluminum. So here's what's interesting. It works in reverse. Bird droppings are literally stripping away protective surfaces off buildings and cars. So like when we deal with car dealerships, one of the things that we talk about is like, they'll be like, man, we missed like cleaning droppings off the cars for like a few days or whatever. When we came back and the paint jobs were eaten through. We'll talk to people, maybe it's residences and they've got like trees like right up above and they have their car in the driveway. And it's like all of a sudden they come out and it's like their paint's fading. It's like, why is that? Because of the acid in the droppings, it's the same stuff that we use to strip things down. It's like going to the shop. It's like taking your car to the freaking shop or taking the side of your building. Like if you've ever had paint stripped off the side of your building, it's like calling a contractor in and telling them like, hey, can you go and strip this paint off the side of my building or whatever, right? It's like, oh, no wonder you got to replace the awnings all the time. And you got to replace, this and this and this about the building all the time because of how acidic the acid is. Okay, here's some other things it's used for. Deep sea mining and metal extraction. So this level of acid is also used to dissolve metals like copper and gold from ore. It can dissolve metals, people. Like, think about that for a minute. Like, the level of acid can dissolve metals. I mean, what is that doing to your building's infrastructure? Take a minute and think about that for a minute. Just let it sit and let it sit and let it sit and let it sit, right? I've got some instances of what that leads to damage-wise. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Okay, here's what else it's used for. Explosives and rocket fuel. It's the same acidity that's used as a chemical catalyst for military explosives. Military explosives use the same level of acid being used at the property because of the birds, and each bird, each individual one, is carrying more and more and more and more explosives. I mean, God, that's like calling up and being like, hey, like, I would love some more loads of, like, C4 to be tried. I'm not saying it's but I'm just saying that, like, think about that. Hey, can we put some more hand grenades out there by the pallets? Like, because we don't have enough of them there. Can we, it's like, that's crazy. Okay, here's something else that level of acid is used for. Nuclear facility cleaning. Acid in that range is strong enough to be used to remove radioactive contaminants from concrete and metal surfaces. You know, like the stuff we like suit up for. Remember how like astronauts, they're all like suited up when they go on their spacewalks, and like, you know, we use this coating and stuff or whatever on the outside of things to like protect people from like radioactive. You remember how if you've ever had to go in for an X-ray, you wear that thing like over you or whatever, all this protection from radio. Or how about this? You go stand out in the sun, you get hit with the rays, and there's a level of radioactivity that hits you. Not good for you at all, right? And the acid in the range of a bird dropping is strong enough to remove radioactive contaminants. Wow, man, like I just thought it was gross. I just thought there was just like disease and stuff, and there totally is. And that's a problem too, but it's like, oh my gosh, what the heck? That's crazy. Okay, so all the science that we're talking about so far helps helps you to understand like why birds are there. Why I've kind of flagged some things as a safe place, and then simultaneously, why some of the things that you've tried maybe aren't working. Okay, so you're going to try and build them out, and they're biologically programmed to come back. In fact, they even train their young. So generations later, they are biologically programmed to come back to that location. If they can't access their original roost, they will move just a few feet away and find another weak spot in the building. I don't know, you guys might be nodding your head right now. Have you ever hung 3/4 inch net or whatever and then come back and somehow found that the birds got back behind the net? That might have been a lot of work. They had to squeeze into some small... Have you seen a bird squeeze in a small, tight spot? I mean, they can squeeze in some tiny, tiny little spots, right? It's like, wait, why did they do that? You would think that they would... It's like, no. Like, same example. You're going to find any way you can to get back in your home. And that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to find their way to get back in, right? They don't just move on if you block them. Oh, and that's what's funny too. Like we'll run into situations, right, where I've seen some of these plants that are spending $250,000, $500,000, even upwards of $1 million for these massive exclusion projects, tons of square footage, right? And the birds just move from being inside of this one thing to like somewhere else, feet away. You still have all the disease risk. You still have all the acidity of the droppings and all the other things that bird issues create there. And it's like, dang it, what did we just spend our money on? All we're doing is shuffling the birds from one spot to another, right? And that's the reason why, because they're biologically programmed. They're just going to shuffle. It's like, well, this is still like pretty close to the spot in my house. Maybe I can just find another thing until this thing wears out, and then I'll go back in there, right? They fight to reclaim that site because that's their house. Their survival instincts, they're programmed at the core to say, this is prime territory, right? And here's some other things. The memory and the GPS work against you too, right? So they're going to memorize those safe roosting spots. They're going to return daily, even after exclusion methods are installed. That's what they're going to do. Even after being removed, the birds are going to attempt to return for weeks or months before they give up, unless the area becomes permanently unwelcoming. They have to be reprogrammed at the core biologically to make that permanent. Otherwise, they're going to keep coming back and coming back. Okay. Droppings and UV markings are still going to attract new birds. So even if you block entry points, UV reflective droppings and scent markers remain visible for the birds, and they tell them it's a safe spot. It's like, remember how I said earlier, and power washing doesn't fix it? It's still there. It's still a problem. Let me clean it with chemicals. Okay, great. Like, go do that. But you're going to get every tiny micro inch of UV marker off of there. Yeah, okay. And here's the last thing, and here's the interesting part. I've never seen someone go through and power wash with black lights. Haven't done it. You can try it, see if it works. All right, come back. You can post in the comments below or whatever and tell me your experience. That's great. I'll change my tune, right, if it works. But you're going to get every single one of those things? Like, no, you're not, right? those birds are gonna fly by, they're gonna see it, and they're gonna come back. That's how it works. It's the reason why you're spending all this money, why somebody's dumping them, or you're doing all this effort, or whatever it is, right? And it seems like the problem is not resolved, right? And by hearing this, here's what's funny is like you guys are realizing now as you're thinking about it, like, wow, it's actually kind of sheer luck if I got birds to actually fully leave a location after trying to do some of this, right? Because they're programmed to come back, right? And once they move back in, they restart that cycle. They're just going to train their young. It's going to get bigger again, okay? Let me give you guys some hard costs on waiting a long time to take care of bird issues. I'm going to give you some stats on some of the damages, too, that are caused by birds. Okay, so the aviation industry spends about $1.2 billion a year trying to mitigate bird issues, trying to deal with bird issues. You guys are probably aware of some of the news somewhat recently, which is going to date this podcast episode, but that's okay because it was relevant news as we're shooting it. But the Korean air crash, like one of the major contributing factors was a bird strike, and it messed up the landing gear, right? 180, I think was the number, 170 something people died in that, unfortunately. It's like, man, I heard that and I was like, oh man, like I feel bad about that. I actually said to the team, I was like, man, maybe if we had done our jobs better, like if I had done my job better, like informing or whatever, maybe that, wouldn't have happened. It's like, man, like I pray for the families and man, but like we can't let this stuff happen, man. It's like, it's totally preventable. And we're not doing enough about it. A small bird infestation can cost property owners around $25,000 a year in cleanup, in structural repairs, and liability claims. $25,000 a year, and then remember that the bird infestation gets bigger over time, right? So it starts here, and it's 25 grand, and then it's more, and then it's more, and then it's more, right? In fact, I'm actually thinking about there's a McDonald's in the UK that had so many droppings that they had to spend $20,000 in a single year just for the droppings cleanup, not the other stuff, not the mitigation, not any of that, just cleaning up droppings, right? It can become such a big problem. This is crazy. This is a crazy stat. Did you know that in HVAC systems and electrical panels that birds cause 5,000 fires a year in just the U.S.? In just the U.S. alone, 5,000 fires a year, right? This is crazy. They cause a ton of roof collapses too, by the way, particularly in areas where you get some pressure on the roof. Think about snows and stuff like that or whatever. Well, it's like now, if you've got these steel beams that are being weakened by bird droppings because of the acid that's literally like, again, the same pH that we use for like to trigger explosives or use an explosive, where that level of acid is just eating through the steel. Well, like, of course, the roof collapse is going to happen. It's inevitable, right? Rooftop fires are really common from bird issues here too, right? Tons of slip and fall issues because bird droppings are slippery. So it's like we'll go out to these industrial plants, for instance, and it's like we see these catwalks and there's birds all over them. It's like, oh man, like this is a liability issue just waiting to happen. Somebody slips, and this has happened, slip, fall off the catwalk, oh my gosh, or fall off going up and down the stairs or whatever, right? Don't want that problem. The average slip and fall lawsuit that we see as a result of something like this is around $46,000. $46,000 for a lawsuit because someone slipped on bird droppings. That's absolutely ridiculous, right? And then on top of it, you've got, of course, the disease risk, bird flu. I saw this the other day. If you go to Google the word bird right now, the very first thing that comes, you know how Google will give you like a suggestion to like finish it'll say bird and then flu. Like seventh down on the list is like bird, like the animal. Like everything is about like bird flu right now. That's how big it is. And I did an episode on it. You can go back and you guys can check that out. Right. But histoplasmosis, I mean, there's like 60 some diseases or whatever that birds carry and transmit. In fact, it's actually about twice as many diseases as rats and mice. But the difference is that rodents stay in a fairly contained area. I mean, starlings are known to fly up to like 60 miles away from where they roost or like sleep overnight to feed. Think about the disease carry and spread over the distance. I mean, it's really, really significant if you think about it that way. Okay. A couple other solutions that you guys have probably tried and are failing. Fake owls. No real danger. They're looking for threats. Again, it's their home, right? Think about how you identify threats at your home. Somebody puts up a statue in their yard. You're not going like, it's not safe for me to stay at my house. Although, I'm not going to lie, there are some scary statues out there. One of my neighbors in my neighborhood, I don't know what the heck, but like, for some reason, they have this giant, like, I don't know, it looks like Brer Rabbit. And it's, when I say giant, it's like 6 or 7 feet tall. Like, I'm like, I'm sorry if you're watching this episode. Your statue's beautiful. Like, you're awesome. Okay. No, it's not. It sucks. Okay. That's all. That's all I'm going to... You're not going to leave your home because there's not a threat. Whatever, right? And they can tell that there's not a threat. Now, birds are neophobic. Now, there are some things where it plays on a bird's natural neophobia. Like, they're afraid of new stuff when you introduce that into their environment, right? And so they're just good. They're going to do that. You might see owls work for a second or some kind of decoy work for a second. And that's because birds are wary of it because it looks like it, but like it could hurt them. But once they figure out that it can't, like they're done. Like they're like, I'm out of here, right? Reflective tape can work temporarily, but birds quickly adapt. Again, part of it is the sensitivity of their vision, right? And how things reflect. So they see that, again, it looks like a threat, but after a while, once they figure out, they're going to figure out a way around it, right? Spikes, they can work for pigeons at times until, how many of you guys have seen, I know we're showing pictures like while we're going through this, but it's like, spikes with like a pigeon nest in them. It's actually been really interesting observing pigeons because they'll just fly over it and they'll just like drop debris. It's like they pile it up and then it's like, perfect, this is a nest. It's like, this is great. Like I just spent a couple grand to have this installed and I actually just built a perfect place for the birds to actually make their nest. It's like, what? Dang it. Like, and then, of course, too, most of the time, those spikes are useless against smaller birds anyway. Like, it's astounded me how many sparrows I've seen just hanging out in spikes, right? Just stuff like that, right? Sound deterrents. Those are some of my favorites. God bless the sound deterrent stuff that's out there or whatever. But it's really interesting because... birds might move for a second, but after a while, it makes the people want to move more than the birds. Some of my favorites are where you walk around, maybe at an airport or something like that, and it sounds like there's a pterodactyl that flew over here, and you're like, oh, what? Oh, like that's a speaker up there. Imagine being like a worker, like in an industrial plant or whatever, and you have to hear freaking something that sounds like it came off like Jurassic Park, like every 10 minutes for 40 hours. Like it's like, someone shoot me right now. Those of you guys who've lived to that know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of my favorites are when birds are like loafing on top of like the speaker or whatever, right? That's making noise. Now, don't get me wrong. I know it's funny. I'm saying stuff. I'm kind of making fun of some of the other stuff. Obviously, anything that's used wrong is not going to work. And honestly, like if they're selling you like a sound or a deterrent thing or something like that or whatever, or exclusion, and they're selling that as an only, so this is the thing that's going to do it, like it's like not true, not going to happen. You might luck out, maybe, right? But it's just not going to happen. You might be able to combine it and get the result you want, but again, I made the case, I think pretty succinctly, that it's biology that's attracting the birds there, and that's what's causing them to stay. So it's like, how can we fix the problem? This is what I love about a baiting program is taking care of this type of problem. And this is not a sales pitch. This is literally like, I'm just talking about science for science. Let's compare it pound for pound. Here's what a baiting program does. Every bird flock has alphas, and I talk about this in one of the other episodes. You can go check it out, or of course you can get certified. We talk more about this, but the alpha birds are communicating to the other birds, hey, this is safe, this is not safe, like all that kind of stuff. Come here, we should blah, blah, So biologically, alphas are integrated into the flock, right? In fact, if you ever see flocks of birds change directions, it's a drop of a hat, it's one alpha bird talking to the surrounding 6 or 8 birds, that's how they change directions. I mean, they're very, very integrated in the flock. They're the ones that eat first, and then they get done eating, and they fly up, and they act out like lookout birds, and they test the food first, and they do all this stuff, or whatever, right? And so here's what a baiting program does. It allows you to fight biology with biology. You're going to change the way that the birds are programmed. That's why Avitrol is a biotechnology. So here's how it works. Basically, you get the birds to actually communicate. What it does is Avitrol, a baiting program, spikes their fight or flight reflex just temporarily, right? And gets them to communicate the same way like they would danger if they were being attacked by a predator. So they're saying, hey, this is not safe. This coyote's here, whatever the thing is, this predator bird's here, get out of here, run for your lives, this is not safe, right? Okay, so I think I've used this parallel before, but I think it's a really apt one. I'm going to use that same thing like a key. Go to your house and you can't get in, right? And it's like you're going to find a way back in your house. But now, what if instead of not being able to get in your house, what if you go to get in there and your house is in like a war zone, right? It's like shells are going off, tanks are going by, you know. Some of you guys might like some Christmas movies, right? You're thinking about Santa Claus, the Santa Claus movie, like the first one, like Tim Allen. He's in there, and they're like, "We're selling the total tank," or whatever, right? You know, it's like Santa in like a Panzer, and he's like, you know, "I hope you've been good, kids." Santa just took out the Peterson house. Incoming! Like, it's hilarious. I'm a nerd, but like. So think about like if your house or your neighborhood became a war zone. Well, dude, it's dangerous for you and your family. You are not going to stay in your house. Like, you're leaving, man. Like, you're biologically programmed like not to want to die too, right? You're leaving. Birds are the same way, right? So you get these alphas to say, hey, this is a war zone. This is dangerous. Like, things are going to eat us if we stay here. We better go somewhere else. And here's what's cool about it, is they'll even train their young not to come back to that site. So that same biological thing where they train their young for generations, they come back and they're looking for UV markers and they're doing all that stuff. Here's what's cool. Who cares about the UV markers and all that stuff anymore? Those birds that you frighten away, those birds are never coming back, ever. In fact, what's cool is we've actually watched bird flocks split up in midair when they fly over a site and rejoin on the other side of a site. They have that strong of a negative reaction. I mean, it's absolutely astounding. So hopefully this episode was really helpful for you guys. If you liked what you heard, take some time, subscribe, and then tell a friend. Share the podcast with somebody else. We're going to unpack more and more bird control secrets. So my hope with today's episode in talking about some of the stats and some of the things is that, first of all, those of you guys who have a bird problem, you're more informed about why the heck you have a bird problem in the first place. That's going to help inform some of your practices, right? They're looking for food, water, harborage, safe places to hang out, and your location is being flagged as safe. Is there anything that you can do, any practices, best practices, SOPs that you can put in place to make sure that that didn't happen in the future, right? It's also going to help you be more educated as to the bird programs that you say yes to, the proposals that you see. And it's like, whether or not, is this just like a money grab? Is this ignorance that's happening here? Am I dealing with an expert here, right? Or are they going to try some stuff? But whatever reason you're on here, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Again, comment below, subscribe, share the episode, more episodes to come. Thanks for being on. Man, hey, enjoy learning more about bird control secrets. We've got more secrets to share. Stay tuned.